The scent of cinnamon and brown sugar drifted through the open window of the Los Alamos church on that scorching June morning in 1878. And Hannah Keller knew, without looking, that every man in Bernalillo County, New Mexico Territory, would be circling her table like hungry wolves before the social even began. She wiped the flour from her hands onto her apron and carefully lifted the last apple pie from the wooden cooling rack her father had built before consumption took him 3 winters past. The golden lattice crust gleamed in the morning sunlight streaming through the church kitchen, perfect and flaky, just as her mother had taught her before the fever claimed her too. Hannah was 22 now, alone except for her younger brother Timothy, who was only 15 and more interested in mucking stables than helping her maintain their small homestead on the edge of town. The church social was the biggest event Los Alamos had seen in months. Reverend Patterson had organized it to raise funds for the new schoolhouse they desperately needed, and every unmarried woman in the territory had shown up with their finest baked goods, hoping to catch the eye of one of the cattlemen or railroad workers who had money in their pockets and marriage on their minds. Hannah had no such hopes. She baked because it was the one thing that still connected her to her mother, the one skill that made her feel worthy of something beyond the endless cycle of washing, mending, and trying to keep their small ranch from falling into complete disrepair. "Those pies smell like heaven itself," Martha Reynolds said, appearing in the doorway with her own contribution, a sad-looking cake that had collapsed on one side. "I swear, Hannah, you could make your fortune in Santa Fe if you wanted." Hannah smiled politely but said nothing. She had heard such things before. Santa Fe might as well have been on the moon for all the chance she had of getting there. The ranch needed her. Timothy needed her, and besides, what would a woman alone do in a city that size? "I am just glad I could help," Hannah replied, arranging her 6 pies on the display table that had been set up in the main hall. Cherry, apple, peach, blueberry, chocolate cream, and her mother's special recipe. A combination of honey and pear that nobody else in the territory could quite replicate. The doors opened at noon, and the crowd flooded in with the kind of enthusiasm that only free food could inspire. Hannah stood behind her table, smoothing down the blue calico dress she had sewn from fabric she had traded eggs for at the general store. It was not fancy, but it was clean and pressed, and it brought out the blue in her eyes, or so Martha always said. The first pie sold within minutes. Then the second. Hannah collected the money carefully, dropping each coin into the collection box for the schoolhouse fund. She was cutting slices from the 3rd pie when she noticed him. He stood at the back of the crowd, taller than most men, with shoulders broad enough to block out the sun. His hat was pushed back on his head, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the temples, and his eyes, even from a distance, were the color of strong coffee. He wore dusty trail clothes, but there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested he was more than just another drifter passing through. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and Hannah felt something shift in her chest, like a door opening that she had not known was closed. He moved through the crowd with purpose, ignoring the other tables laden with cakes and cookies and sweetbreads. When he reached Hannah's table, he removed his hat, and she could see his face clearly. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with a strong jaw shadowed by a few days of stubble, and a mouth that looked like it knew how to smile but had not done so in some time. "Madam," he said, and his voice was deep and rough, like gravel in a creek bed, "I would like to purchase a slice of pie." "Which kind would you prefer?" Hannah asked, surprised to find her own voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. He looked at the remaining pies, then back at her. "Whichever one you recommend." "The honey pear is special," she heard herself say. It was my mother's recipe, he nodded. Then I will have that. She cut him a generous slice and placed it on a tin plate. He paid her twice what she was asking, dropping the coins into the collection box before she could protest. Then he took the plate and fork and moved to the side, leaning against the wall while he ate. Hannah tried not to watch him, but her eyes kept drifting in his direction. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, and when he finished, he returned to her table. "That was the finest pie I have had in 10 years of traveling," he said. "I will take another slice." "Of the same?" Hannah asked. "Of whatever you have left." By the end of the social, he had purchased 9 slices of pie, working his way through nearly 2 entire pies by himself. Other men had bought slices too, but none with the same methodical determination. When the crowd finally began to thin, and the sun started its descent toward the Jemez Mountains in the distance, he approached her table one final time. "I am Cole Masters," he said. "I have a cattle ranch about 15 miles north of here, up in the high country. I came to town to hire some hands for the summer drive, but I find myself more interested in your pies than in cattle at the moment." Hannah felt her cheeks flush. "I am Hannah Keller. I have the small place on the eastern edge of town near the dry wash." "I know it," Cole said. "I passed it on my way in. The fence needs mending." It was not criticism, just observation, but Hannah felt defensive anyway. "My brother and I manage as best we can." "I meant no offense," Cole said quickly. "I only mention it because I am handy with fence work. And I would very much like to try more of your pies." "There is another social next month," Hannah said. "That is a long time to wait," Cole replied, and this time he did smile, and it transformed his entire face, making him look younger and less weathered. "Perhaps you might consider selling pies privately. I would be happy to pay whatever you think fair." Hannah knew she should say no. Taking private orders from a man she had just met, a man who made her pulse race just by looking at her, seemed like asking for trouble. But the money would help, and there was something about Cole Masters that made her want to say yes to things she would normally refuse. "I suppose I could bake a pie or two," she said carefully, "if you are willing to come by the ranch to collect them." "I will be there Sunday afternoon," Cole said, "if that suits you." Sunday afternoon would be acceptable, Hannah agreed. He tipped his hat to her and left, and Hannah watched him go, wondering what exactly she had just agreed to. Sunday came faster than Hannah expected. She rose before dawn to start the baking, choosing the honey pear recipe again because Cole had seemed to enjoy it so much. She also made an apple pie, just to provide variety. Timothy grumbled about the heat from the oven making the small house unbearable, but he quieted when Hannah explained that the money from selling pies could mean new boots for him before winter. Cole arrived precisely when he said he would, riding a handsome bay gelding and leading a pack mule. He had cleaned up since the social, his face freshly shaved and his clothes, while still practical work wear, looking considerably less dusty. "Miss Keller," he greeted her, dismounting with easy grace. "Mr. Masters," she replied, wiping her hands on her apron. "I have your pies ready." She brought them out, carefully wrapped in clean cloths, and Cole examined them with the seriousness of a man evaluating livestock. "They look perfect," he said. "What do I owe you?" Hannah named a price that seemed fair, perhaps a bit more than she would charge at a church social, but less than what the hotel in town would ask. Cole paid without haggling, then surprised her by not immediately leaving. "That fence of yours is in worse shape than I thought," he said, nodding toward the eastern pasture where several rails had come loose from the posts. "If you have some spare wood and nails, I could fix it for you. Consider it payment for the privilege of getting these pies before anyone else." "You do not need to do that," Hannah protested. "You have already paid fairly." "I know I do not need to," Cole said, "but I would like to. I am not much for sitting idle and I have the time." Hannah hesitated, then nodded. "The lumber is in the barn. Timothy can show you where we keep the tools." She went back inside, telling herself she was not watching through the window as Cole removed his hat and vest and set to work on the fence. But she was watching, noting the efficient way he moved, the strength in his arms as he drove nails into weathered wood, the careful attention he paid to making sure each rail was level and secure. By the time the sun reached its peak, he had repaired 20 feet of fence. Hannah brought him water and a slice of the pie he had just purchased, and he accepted both gratefully, sitting in the shade of the barn while he ate. "You run this place alone?" he asked. "You and your brother, since our father passed 3 years ago," Hannah confirmed. "It is not much, just a few acres and some chickens. We used to have cattle, but we had to sell them off after the dry summer 2 years back." Cole nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It is hard work for 2 people, especially when one of them is still growing." "We manage," Hannah said, hearing the defensive note in her voice again. "I can see that," Cole said. "I only meant that it is admirable. A lot of people would have given up and moved to town." "This land belonged to my parents," Hannah said quietly. "My mother is buried in the orchard out back. I cannot just abandon it." Cole looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "No," he said. "I do not suppose you can." He stayed for another hour, finishing the fence work and refusing Hannah's offer of payment beyond the pie. As he prepared to leave, he turned back to her. "I will be back next Sunday," he said, "if you are willing to bake for me again." "What kind of pie would you like?" Hannah asked. "Surprise me," Cole said, mounting his horse. "I trust your judgment." He rode away, and Hannah stood in the yard long after he disappeared from view, the dust from his horse's hooves settling slowly in the still air. The pattern continued for the next month. Every Sunday, Cole would arrive at Hannah's ranch, collect whatever pies she had baked for him, and then spend several hours working on various repairs around the property. He fixed the barn door that had been hanging crooked for 2 years. He patched the roof where rain had been leaking into the kitchen. He helped Timothy clear rocks from the north field so they could plant winter wheat. Hannah told herself it was just business. She was providing a service, and he was paying for it. And if he chose to spend his time helping with chores afterward, well, that was his decision. But she could not deny the way her heart lifted every time she saw him riding up the path, or the way their conversations grew longer and more personal with each visit. He told her about his ranch, how he had spent 7 years working as a hand for other men before finally saving enough to buy his own land, how he had built his house with his own hands, log by log, how he ran 200 head of cattle in the high country where the grass stayed green longer and the water ran cold and clear from mountain springs. She told him about her childhood, about her mother teaching her to bake on a cast iron stove that was older than she was, about her father reading to them from the Bible every night before bed, about her dreams, small and practical though they were, of someday having a real kitchen with a proper window over the sink and shelves for all her baking supplies. "Why do you buy so many pies?" Hannah asked him one Sunday in late July as they sat on the porch watching storm clouds gather over the mountains. "Surely you cannot eat them all yourself." Cole smiled, that rare full smile that still made her breath catch. "I share them with my ranch hands. They think I have found some secret bakery in Santa Fe. I have not told them the truth because then they would all want to come calling, and I prefer to keep you to myself." The words hung in the air between them, heavier with meaning than perhaps Cole had intended. Hannah felt her cheeks warm and she looked down at her hands, calloused and rough from work. I am not sure I am worth keeping to anyone, she said quietly. Cole reached over and gently lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. Then you are not seeing yourself clearly, he said. You are the strongest, most capable woman I have ever met. You are beautiful and kind and talented. Any man would be lucky to know you. Cole, Hannah whispered, and then his lips were on hers, soft and warm and tasting of the cherry pie they had shared. It was her first kiss, and it felt like something she had been waiting for her entire life without knowing it. When they pulled apart, Cole rested his forehead against hers. I did not come here today planning to do that, he said. But I am not sorry I did. Neither am I, Hannah admitted. I should tell you something, Cole said, pulling back slightly. I did not just stumble into that church social by accident. I heard about you before I ever came to Los Alamos. The men in Santa Fe talk about the woman who bakes pies so good they could make a grown man weep. I came to town specifically to meet you. Why? Hannah asked. Because I am tired of being alone, Cole said simply. I have a ranch that is doing well, but it is just land and cattle and empty rooms. I want more than that. I want a partner. I want a family. I want someone to build something with. And when I tasted your pie that first day, when I looked into your eyes, I knew I had found what I was looking for. Hannah's heart was racing so fast she thought it might burst from her chest. That is quite forward, Mr. Masters. I know, Cole said. And if I am moving too fast, if I am presuming too much, please tell me and I will step back. But I am 30 years old, Hannah. I have spent half my life drifting, and I am done with that. When I know what I want, I do not see the point in dancing around it. And what is it you want? Hannah asked, though she thought she knew the answer. You, Cole said. If you will have me. Hannah thought about her small ranch, about the endless work and worry, about Timothy who needed raising and the weight of responsibility that sat on her shoulders every day. Then she thought about Cole, about his strength and kindness, about the way he looked at her like she was precious, about the way her heart felt lighter when he was near. I will have you, she said, but there are conditions. Cole raised an eyebrow. Such as, Timothy comes with me. I will not abandon him. I would expect nothing less. He can go to school in the winters and help with ranch work in the summers. I could use another hand, and he is a good worker. And my mother's grave, I need to be able to visit it. It is only 15 miles. We can ride down as often as you want. Or, Cole paused, his expression becoming even more serious, if you would prefer, we could maintain your ranch as well. Use it for horses or as a line camp. That way you would never truly leave it. Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. You would do that? Hannah, I would do just about anything to make you happy, Cole said. I thought I made that clear, she laughed, a sound of pure joy that surprised them both. Yes, I suppose you did. So is that a yes? Cole asked. Will you marry me? Yes, Hannah said. Yes, I will marry you. Cole pulled her close and kissed her again, deeper this time, and Hannah felt the last of her reservations melt away. This was right. This was what she had been waiting for without knowing it. They married in September, in the same church where Cole had first tasted Hannah's pies. Half the town came to the wedding, curious about the rancher from the high country who had courted the Keller girl with such determination. Reverend Patterson performed the ceremony, and Martha Reynolds cried through the entire thing, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Timothy stood beside Hannah as she made her vows, looking uncomfortable in the new suit Cole had bought him, but proud nonetheless. He had been wary of Cole at first, protective of his sister. But Cole had won him over by treating him like a man rather than a child, asking his opinion on ranch matters and teaching him to work with horses. Hannah wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in a trunk, altered to fit her slightly taller frame. When Cole saw her walking down the aisle, the look on his face made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the territory. The reception was held in the church hall, and of course, Hannah had baked pies, dozens of them, with help from Martha and several other women from town. Cole made a show of buying the first slice of each variety, just as he had at that first social, and the crowd laughed and applauded. "You are causing quite a spectacle," Hannah whispered to him as they stood together cutting the wedding cake, a 3-layer creation that Hannah had stayed up all night to perfect. "Good," Cole replied. "Let everyone know that I am the luckiest man alive." They spent their wedding night at the hotel in Los Alamos, a luxury Hannah had never experienced before. Cole was gentle and patient, and when Hannah woke the next morning in his arms, she felt like a different person than she had been the day before. Not less herself, but somehow more complete. The next day they rode to Cole's ranch, with Timothy following on his own horse, looking excited and nervous in equal measure. The ranch was everything Cole had promised and more. The house was solid timber with a wide porch and real glass windows. The barn was larger than Hannah's entire house in Los Alamos. The corrals were well maintained, and the cattle dotting the hillsides looked healthy and fat. But what took Hannah's breath away was the kitchen. Cole had clearly been working on it during the weeks between his proposal and the wedding. There was a new cast iron stove, larger and more modern than anything Hannah had ever used. There were shelves built along one entire wall, ready to hold her baking supplies and dishes. And there, over the sink, was a window that looked out over the valley with a view that stretched for miles. "Oh, Cole," Hannah breathed, turning to find him watching her anxiously. "You like it?" he asked. "I tried to remember everything you mentioned wanting." "I love it," Hannah said, and she meant it with her whole heart. The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Hannah had run her own household for 3 years, answering to no one, and suddenly she was part of a partnership. But Cole was patient, and he consulted her on decisions rather than simply making pronouncements. They disagreed sometimes, usually about small things like how to organize the pantry or whether to sell cattle in the spring or fall, but they always talked through their differences until they found solutions both could accept. Timothy thrived at the ranch. He shot up 3 inches in the first 6 months, growing from a boy into a young man. Cole taught him to rope and ride properly, to read cattle and anticipate weather. In the evenings, Hannah made sure he kept up with his reading and writing, preparing him for the day when he might want land of his own. The ranch hands, 4 grizzled men who had been with Cole since he first bought the property, accepted Hannah with cautious respect that gradually warmed into genuine affection. She baked for them constantly, pies and bread and cakes, and in return they treated her like a queen, doffing their hats whenever she appeared and defending her honor with fierce loyalty. That first winter was hard. Snow fell early and heavy in the high country, and there were weeks when they could not get to town at all. Hannah worried about their supplies, about the cattle trapped in the upper pastures, about everything that could go wrong. But Cole remained steady and calm, and his confidence helped her trust that they would make it through. They did more than make it through. When spring came and they counted the herd, they had only lost 5 head, far better than most ranchers in the territory. The calves came strong and healthy, and Cole was able to hire 2 more hands to help with the summer work. Hannah discovered she was pregnant in May. She had suspected for several weeks, but had not wanted to say anything until she was certain. When she finally told Cole, he picked her up and spun her around the kitchen, laughing with pure joy. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying. "Hannah, we are going to have a baby." "I know," Hannah said, laughing despite the nausea that had been plaguing her for weeks. "I am the one carrying it." Cole set her down carefully, suddenly anxious. "Are you feeling all right? Should you be on your feet? Do you need to sit down?" "I am fine," Hannah assured him. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am not made of glass." But Cole worried anyway, hovering over her and trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work. It drove Hannah slightly crazy, but it also touched her deeply. She had been alone for so long, responsible for everything, that having someone care for her with such devotion felt like a gift. The baby came in January, during a blizzard that trapped them in the house for 3 days. The midwife from Los Alamos could not make it through the snow, so Hannah labored with only Cole and Timothy to help her. She had never been so frightened in her life, but Cole stayed beside her the entire time, holding her hand and wiping her forehead with cool cloths, and telling her she was the bravest person he had ever known. When their son finally arrived, red-faced and wailing, Cole cried. Hannah had never seen him cry before, and the sight of tears streaming down his weathered face as he held their tiny baby made her fall in love with him all over again. They named him James, after Hannah's father. He was a hungry baby, demanding and loud, but Hannah loved every exhausting minute of motherhood. Cole was besotted, spending every free moment holding his son, talking to him in a low voice about cattle and horses, and all the things they would do together when James was older. Life settled into a new rhythm. Hannah's days were full of caring for James and managing the household and still finding time to bake, because she could not imagine giving that up. Cole expanded the ranch, buying more land and increasing the herd. Timothy, now 17, was nearly as tall as Cole and had become an invaluable part of the operation. When James was 2, Hannah gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Matthew and Margaret. The house suddenly felt very full and very loud, but Hannah would not have changed it for anything. Cole hired a young woman from town, a widow named Sarah who needed work, to help with the children and the house, and Hannah was grateful for the assistance. The ranch prospered. Within 5 years of their marriage, Cole had established himself as one of the most successful cattlemen in the territory. But he never forgot where he had come from, and he never forgot the woman who had changed his life with her pies and her strength and her willingness to take a chance on a lonely rancher. Every year on their anniversary, Cole would ride down to Los Alamos and buy every slice of pie Hannah brought to the church social, just as he had that first day. It became something of a tradition, a town joke that everyone looked forward to. And every year, Hannah would bake him a special honey pear pie, the same recipe her mother had taught her, the same pie that had brought them together. Timothy left when he was 20, heading to Colorado to work on the railroad. Hannah cried when he rode away, but she was proud of the man he had become. He wrote regularly, and he always came home for Christmas, bringing stories of the wider world and gifts for his nieces and nephews. In 1885, New Mexico Territory was changing rapidly. The railroad had finally reached Los Alamos, bringing new settlers and new opportunities. Cole was offered a position on the Territorial Council, representing the interests of ranchers in Bernalillo County. He hesitated, not wanting to spend time away from the ranch and his family, but Hannah encouraged him to accept. "You have worked so hard to build something here," she told him. "You should have a voice in shaping the future of this territory." So Cole accepted, and twice a year he traveled to Santa Fe for the council sessions. Hannah went with him when she could, and she discovered that she enjoyed the city more than she had expected. She sold pies to a fancy restaurant there, a side business that brought in extra money and gave her an outlet for her baking beyond the ranch. The children grew. James became a serious boy, interested in books and learning, and Hannah and Cole eventually sent him to school in Santa Fe, hoping he might become a lawyer or a doctor. Matthew was all cowboy, following his father everywhere and learning the cattle business from the ground up. Margaret was a perfect combination of both parents, strong and stubborn like her mother, charming and determined like her father. In 1890, Hannah gave birth to their last child, another boy they named Samuel. He was a surprise, arriving when Hannah was nearly 40 and had assumed her childbearing years were behind her. But he was a happy, easy baby, and Cole declared him the perfect completion to their family. The ranch continued to thrive. Cole had nearly 1,000 head of cattle now, and he had expanded into horses as well, breeding stock that was in high demand throughout the territory. He employed 15 men full-time, and the ranch had become a significant part of the local economy. But through all the growth and change, Cole never forgot what mattered most. He still made time to sit on the porch with Hannah in the evenings, watching the sunset and talking about their day. He still surprised her with small gifts, a new set of mixing bowls from Santa Fe, a rocking chair he had built himself for the porch. He still told her, at least once a day, that she was the most remarkable woman he had ever known, and Hannah still baked pies. It had become part of who she was, part of how she showed love to her family and connected with her community. She taught Margaret the honey pear recipe, passing down her mother's legacy to another generation. She baked for every church social, every barn raising, every celebration in Los Alamos. Her pies were legendary throughout the territory, and people came from miles away just to taste them. In 1898, when Hannah was 46 and Cole was 50, New Mexico Territory was lobbying hard for statehood. Cole was deeply involved in the political process, using his position and influence to advocate for the changes he believed would benefit ranchers and small farmers. Hannah was proud of him, proud of how far they had come from that first meeting at a church social 20 years earlier. They celebrated their 20th anniversary with a party at the ranch that seemed to include half the territory. Their children were all there, James home from law school, Matthew working alongside his father, Margaret preparing to attend teaching college in the fall, and Samuel, a wild 8-year-old who reminded Hannah of Timothy at that age. As the sun set and the party continued, Cole pulled Hannah away from the crowd and led her to the porch where they had sat so many evenings over the years. 20 years, he said, putting his arm around her waist. Do you remember that first day? When I walked into that church social and saw you standing behind a table full of pies. Of course I remember, Hannah said, leaning into him. You bought 9 slices of pie and I thought you were the strangest man I had ever met. Cole laughed. I had to have an excuse to keep talking to you. And besides, they really were the best pies I had ever tasted. Were, Hannah teased. Are you saying my baking has declined? Never, Cole said, turning serious. But even if you never baked another pie, I would still love you just as much. The pies brought me to you, Hannah, but it is everything else about you that made me stay. I love you too, Hannah said softly. More than I thought it was possible to love another person. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. From inside the house, they could hear music and laughter, the sounds of their family and friends celebrating. You ever regret it? Cole asked. Marrying me, leaving your little ranch, taking on all of this. Hannah turned to look at him, this man who had changed her entire life, who had given her more than she had ever dreamed possible. Not for a single second, she said. You are the best decision I ever made. Cole kissed her then, slow and sweet, and Hannah felt the same flutter in her chest that she had felt that first time, 20 years ago. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. Hannah's brother Timothy married a woman from Colorado and had children of his own. James became a successful lawyer in Santa Fe, but came home often, always bringing his mother the special ingredients she requested for her baking. Matthew took over more and more of the ranch operations as Cole gradually stepped back, preparing to pass the business to the next generation. Margaret became a teacher in Los Alamos, beloved by her students. Samuel grew into a young man determined to become a veterinarian, fascinated by animal medicine. In 1902, Hannah and Cole became grandparents for the first time when James and his wife Elizabeth had a daughter. More grandchildren followed over the years, filling the ranch with noise and energy. Hannah loved being a grandmother, loved spoiling the little ones and then sending them home to their parents. She baked constantly for them, cookies and cakes and of course pies, passing on her skills and her recipes to any who showed interest. Cole's hair went gray, then white, but he remained strong and active. He scaled back his political involvement as the years went on, preferring to spend his time on the ranch with Hannah and their growing family. They traveled some, taking trips to San Francisco and Denver, but they always came home to the ranch in the New Mexico high country, the place they had built together. In 1910, when Hannah was 58, she finally compiled all her recipes into a book, writing them down carefully with notes and instructions. She made copies for each of her children, binding them in leather covers that Cole tooled himself. It was her legacy, she told them, the skills and knowledge passed down from her mother and now passed on to them. The ranch continued to evolve with the times. Cole invested in new breeding stock, incorporating some of the latest ranching techniques while still maintaining the traditional practices that had served him well. When automobiles began appearing in Los Alamos, Cole bought one, though he still preferred to travel by horse for any real distance. In 1915, Hannah and Cole celebrated their 37th anniversary. They were both in their 60s now, slowing down but still active and engaged with life. Their children were all settled with families of their own. The ranch was thriving under Matthew's capable management. They had 16 grandchildren and were awaiting the arrival of their first great-grandchild. "We have had a good life," Cole said one evening as they sat on their porch, a ritual they had maintained for nearly 4 decades. "The best life," Hannah agreed. "Better than anything I imagined for myself back when I was a scared young woman trying to hold onto a failing ranch." "You were never just a scared young woman," Cole said. "You were always extraordinary. I just had the good sense to recognize it." Hannah smiled. "And the good appetite to eat 9 slices of pie in one day." "That too," Cole admitted, "though I maintain that they were exceptional pies." "They were my mother's recipes," Hannah said. "I was just following instructions." "No," Cole said firmly. "They were made with your hands and your heart and your skill. Give yourself credit, Hannah. You have never been good at that." Hannah was quiet for a moment. It was true that she had always downplayed her own abilities, always attributed her success to luck or other people, or anything except her own hard work and talent. But looking back over the decades, she could see the truth in Cole's words. She had built something significant, not just the ranch and the family, but a reputation and a legacy that would outlast her. "Thank you," she said finally, "for always believing in me, even when I did not believe in myself." "That is what love is," Cole said simply. "Seeing the best in each other and helping each other become it." In 1918, the world was in the grip of a terrible war overseas, and even in remote New Mexico, the effects were felt. 2 of their grandsons enlisted and went to France. Hannah worried constantly, praying every night for their safe return. She baked and sent care packages, pies that probably arrived as crumbs, but that carried her love across the ocean nonetheless. Both grandsons came home safely when the war ended, and Hannah wept with relief. The experience reminded her how precious and fragile life was, how important it was to cherish every moment with the people she loved. Cole had a health scare in 1920, a problem with his heart that left him weak for several months. Hannah nursed him through it with the same determination she had brought to everything else in her life. She modified her recipes to be healthier, cutting back on salt and fat. She made him rest even when he protested that he was fine. She stayed by his side through the long nights when he struggled to breathe, holding his hand and reminding him of all the reasons he needed to fight. He recovered, though he was never quite as strong as he had been before. But he remained cheerful and engaged, playing with his great-grandchildren and offering advice to Matthew about ranch management, and taking slow walks with Hannah through the property they had built together. "I am not ready to go yet," he told Hannah one afternoon as they sat in the garden she had planted years ago. "I have too much I still want to see. I want to meet more great-grandchildren. I want to see what the ranch looks like in another 10 years. I want to grow old with you." "Then stay," Hannah said fiercely. "Stay with me as long as you can." "I plan to," Cole promised. And he did. Against the predictions of the doctor from Santa Fe, Cole rallied and regained much of his strength. He lived to see New Mexico achieve statehood in 1912, a culmination of all the political work he had done over the decades. He lived to see the ranch expand to over 3,000 acres. He lived to see his children succeed in their chosen paths, and his grandchildren start having children of their own. In 1925, Hannah and Cole celebrated their 47th anniversary. They were both in their 70s now, moving slower and resting more, but still deeply in love. The party was smaller than their 20th anniversary celebration, mostly just family, but it was warm and joyful. Margaret, now a school principal, had organized the whole thing. She had arranged for Hannah's first church social table to be brought to the ranch, the same table where she had sold those first pies to Cole all those years ago. On it, she placed 6 pies, representing the 6 original varieties Hannah had baked for that fateful social. "Dad should buy every slice," Matthew said, grinning, "for old time's sake." "I will do better than that," Cole said. "I will buy every pie." He pulled out his wallet and placed far too much money on the table, and everyone laughed and applauded, just as the crowd at the church had done so many years ago. Then, Cole took Hannah's hand and led her in a slow dance while their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren watched. 47 years, Cole said softly, "and I love you more now than I did on that first day." "That is impossible," Hannah said. "You ate 9 slices of pie because of how you felt on that first day." "Then I love you as much," Cole amended, "but I know you better now. I know your strengths and your flaws and your fears and your dreams. I know how you hum when you bake and how you cry at weddings. I know you snore just a little and you always wake up before dawn. I know all of you, Hannah, and I love all of you." Hannah felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I know all of you too, and I cannot imagine having lived any other life than this one, with you." Cole passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1927. He was 75 years old, and he had lived to see his ranch become one of the most successful in the state, his children thrive, and his family expand to include dozens of descendants. Hannah was with him at the end, holding his hand just as she had held it through so many other challenges over the years. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, from neighboring ranchers to state politicians to the men who had worked for Cole for decades. They all had stories about his fairness, his wisdom, his generosity. But the eulogy that mattered most to Hannah came from Matthew, who spoke about his father's greatest achievement. "My father built a ranch from nothing," Matthew said, his voice thick with emotion. "He helped shape the future of this state. He was respected by everyone who knew him. But the thing I admired most about him was the way he loved my mother. He saw her strength and her worth when the world might have overlooked her. He partnered with her in the truest sense. He showed all of us sons what it means to be a man, not through dominance but through devotion. And he showed all of us daughters what we should demand from any man who claims to love us. That is his real legacy, not cattle or land but love." Hannah wept through the entire service. She wept for the life they had shared, for the future they would not have, for the empty space beside her where Cole had always been. But mixed with the grief was gratitude, deep and profound. She had been given 47 years with an extraordinary man. She had built a family and a legacy. She had lived a life full of love and purpose. She stayed on at the ranch, cared for by her children and grandchildren. She still baked, though less frequently now. She sat on the porch every evening, remembering all the times she had sat there with Cole. She visited his grave often, placed near her parents' plot on the original Keller property that was still maintained as part of the ranch. In 1930, at the age of 78, Hannah Keller Masters passed away in her sleep, surrounded by family. She was laid to rest beside Cole, their graves marked by simple headstones that stated only their names and dates and the words "forever together." But their story did not end there. The ranch continued under Matthew's management, then his children, passing down through the generations. The original house was preserved and eventually opened to visitors as a historical site. The kitchen where Hannah had baked so many pies maintained exactly as it had been. Hannah's recipe book was published by her great-granddaughter in 1955 and became a bestseller throughout the Southwest. The honey pear pie recipe, still called Hannah's Special, was served at the state capitol every year on the anniversary of New Mexico's statehood. The story of Hannah and Cole became part of local legend, told and retold until it was hard to separate fact from fiction. But at its heart, the story was simple and true. A woman with talent and determination, a man with the wisdom to recognize her worth, and a love that began with pies at a church social and lasted for nearly half a century, shaping not just 2 lives but generations to come. The church in Los Alamos still held socials, and there was always someone who baked pies in honor of Hannah Keller. Young couples would come to see the original table, preserved in the church's small museum, and imagine their own love stories beginning there. The ranch was still operational well into the 21st century, a testament to what 2 people could build when they worked together with love and respect and unwavering commitment. And somewhere in heaven, or wherever souls went when they left this earth, Cole and Hannah were together again, perhaps sitting on a porch watching a sunset, perhaps sharing a slice of honey pear pie, perhaps simply holding hands and grateful for the life they had shared and the love that had sustained them through all their years together.